Hey there, you found Cameras and Car Seats, the podcast for photographers who are tired of being told to hustle harder while trying to remember if you grabbed diapers at your last Target run. I'm Jamie, your destination adventure elopement photographer who somehow manages to adventure with couples while raising tiny humans.
And I'm Alex, holding down the Lincoln logs in the Midwest traditional wedding scene, proving you can crush those weekend weddings and still make it to family dinner. If you're editing in the pickup line, scheduling client calls during nap time, or just trying to figure out how to run a profitable photography business without sacrificing your family life, you're in the right place. We're dropping real, actionable advice that actually works for mom photographers.
No bro marketing, no toxic hustle culture, just two photographer moms keeping it real about making this whole business thing work while raising our families. So grab your watered down iced coffee.
Ignore that pile of laundry for another hour or day.
And let's dive into today's episode. Today, we wanted to welcome our guest, Lindsey, to Cameras and Car Seats. Lindsey is a financial therapist, coach, licensed mental health professional, wife, and work-at-home mom of two. As someone who has done the work of transforming her relationship with money, overcome childhood trauma, endured the loss of a pregnancy, and suffered from postpartum anxiety and depression, she knows that life can be extremely difficult. Today, she's going to share her expert insight and tips on how to feel in control of your money, heal your money mindset, and how to deal with finances as a busy entrepreneur and mom.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have a guest on. Her name is Lindsey. And Lindsey, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and who you serve and your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I am Lindsey. I am your favorite financial therapist. And essentially, I provide cognitive behavioral therapy, and I merge that with financial education. And so I work with individuals and couples. Right now, I probably actually have a solid 50-50 split. But a lot of what I see is entrepreneurs with variable income, particularly, which adds, an extra layer of complexity to finances, which we a lot of times already have crazy money trauma with or whatever. And we just work through kind of some of the habits that we have and changing those root cause issues of, money mismanagement. And then we get you going on having a much healthier relationship with money.
Oh, that is good. Because I'm just yes.
Yeah, I know. Jamie and I were talking. We were like, this is basically kind of like our own little coaching call that people are going to listen to.
We're just going to treat
this
as a coaching call.
Yeah, this is so fun. I love it because it is definitely hard as an entrepreneur to shift your money mindset and start managing that instead of having somebody else deal with that when you don't have to work for yourself.
Also hard as a mom and as a woman because I feel taking on the patriarchy.
Taking on the patriarchy is real tough.
There's so many things to that because especially a lot of moms, a lot of our audiences, photographers, they are dealing with the fact of how do I make an income and still be there for my kids? How do I make a budget? How do I be there? How do I do both?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so before we dive into all of that, I would love to know from a business mom perspective, what does your daily routine look like? Does it vary from day to day? Do you have a pretty set routine? What is that?
Oh, it is all over the place. Yeah. Totally all over the place. And here's the thing. So I've been in business now formally for just under 2 years. So I'm still relatively new in the grand scheme of life. But before I'll give you the little trajectory of kind of my business. So then you can have a better understanding of how my day looks. Mm-hmm. But for a really long time, up until September of 2024, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom and also a financial therapist by nap times, nighttime, and weekend. So most of my clients I was seeing in kind of the off hours, if you will. I'm really lucky that I had my mom help a couple hours a week, and then my mother-in-law also helped with the kids for about 4 hours a week. Which I'm super lucky to have that, I realize. But yeah, so that was just a whole mess of things. And then when my business really started doing quite well, we actually retired my husband out of corporate America. Nice. And he had been there for almost a decade. And, we just have this bigger vision for our life. And when we realized we had gotten to a place where we had saved enough, for our future and our retirement and whatnot, and my business could sustain us as a family, and we really took a chance on that, then things shifted a little bit. Now he's mostly home. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and he's mostly home with them. Again, has a little bit of help from my mom and mother-in-law, and then little preschool kind of stuff in there. And so I'm able to take on obviously more clients than I was before, which is super helpful. But we're still kind of in this phase of, I also have ADHD, and so my brain cannot do like one thing forever and always. I like to actually have a variable schedule. So that was a long-winded answer to say it is everywhere, and I kind of like it that way. And it's helpful.
I thrive on chaos, so relatable.
Same. Yeah,
I love it as a mom, especially like in the different, it changes in the seasons of life, like based on your kids' ages and what their schedule is. And I think that's one beautiful thing about entrepreneurship and running your own business is you get to have that flexibility and change it on based on what you like and what your life is at that moment.
Also relatable because I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I'm like, same boat.
Same boat, same season of life. It's just all kind of messy and chaotic. And why don't we just like bring a business in to really complicate things?
Bring a podcast into it. Bring everything.
Yes. I love that.
No.
Okay. So let's dive right in. And what are some common pain points that you hear from mom business owners about finances and money mindset?
Great question. It depends on if we're talking single moms or if we're talking moms who are in a coupleship, right? And so I'll kind of speak to both. Single moms are kind of experiencing their own battle with, a lot of it is, I like to say that time and money are of equal value as far as like what our currency looks like. And so for single moms out there, it adds another layer of complexity to the entire thing of like, what is the income looking like? Is child support there? Is it happening? Is it not happening? All of these things. With women who are in partnerships, a lot of communication issues is the primary area. And I say for women specifically, collectively, right, is avoidance. We have been taught for a really long time that we are not good at money. You're just not good at math. You're not good at numbers. And it's like a total lie. First of all, most of the women I work with are actually far better than their male counterparts at the numbers, which is kind of comical when we get into it. But I think the avoidance is definitely an issue. Once we can, shame lives in that deep, dark box. And once we can like let a little light into that box, we can get out of that shame spiral, which then lets us move forward in our life a little bit. However, those then communication issues in a partnership usually are a little stifling sometimes as well.
Oh my God, that was like everything right there. I'm like, yeah, that's relatable. Because my husband's always like, I don't know numbers, and I'm just like, the spreadsheet.
I feel like when I was a stay-at-home mom and my husband worked full-time, it was like he was really good at all the numbers and keeping track of all that. And then when he decided to stay home and then I worked, it like flipped. And so now we have like opposite roles and we're like, okay, we need to meet like in the middle somewhere here.
Totally. Well, and I always encourage couples to have money dates. Like same thing. Like for a long time, my husband and I argued about money because he was a saver, I was a spender, or he was a saver that liked to spend on lunch at the office, or he was, buying duck decoys. And I was like, well, we don't need those. That has no benefit to me, right? Or I was getting a massage and same thing for it. So like that disagreement or our priorities were just different. And I like to tell my couples, like, yes, you are in a coupleship. That's important. And you're going to have overarching family goals. I know a lot of moms are listening to this, right? So you have family goals, you have goals for your coupleship, but then you also are allowed to have individual goals. My husband always calls them his selfish goals. I'm like, they are not selfish. Like, you get to go hunting. That's his thing. He loves it. Do it, right? But we need to have some guidelines around what that looks like. And so I encourage, this is not like a set in stone, this is right for every single couple situation, but for a lot of couples, this makes a lot of sense, right? That if you do have two incomes coming in, both go into the joint checking account, right? And then you both also have individual checking accounts, and you have an agreed upon equitable number that you both are getting deposited into your individual checking accounts. And that's your money to manage, right? So I like to spend my money on going on girls' trips, on doing dinners with my friends, on those massages that I talked about, on Starbucks. I love all that stuff. That my husband has nothing to do with, doesn't care about, right? And in he likes to spend his money again on a duck hunting trip, on decoys, on waiters, on whatever the hell else he buys. I don't know. But we know what that number is, and we talk about our money often. We have money dates once a month, sometimes usually twice a month. We have like a main date that's like a 20-30 minute date, and then we have a quickie, halfway through the month, and talk about our money there and just do our little adjustments. But there are times where we're like, okay, income is up, let's like maybe turn up the dial on those individual shame-free spending accounts. And other times we're like, man, we're just going to turn the dial down on that a little bit. And we keep a pulse on it, and it's a way to mitigate so many fights. Like I honestly could not tell you the last time he and I fought about money, because we have practiced this method so much, and now it's easy for us.
I love that so much, because we personally have like just a joint account, and then that's it. Like we have our joint account and then like business accounts and such. But I love the idea of having your own like personal money, because then there's also like that guilt-freeness of it, like, well, I wanted to get this, but I don't know. And then it kind of feels like you're there. It's just like a gray area sometimes. So that's just super smart.
Honestly, I've never had a joint check. I don't know if I should be admitting this, but like we have always kept our stuff separate. And I'm like 9 years together. We've never had a joint account, but I'm like, that could actually, I'm like blowing my mind right now. So I'm just like, that's so fascinating. Cause I remember when we had certain issues, it was like, well, I wanted to go do this, but is it okay if I spend this money? Even though technically we've talked about the budget, it kind of eliminates that like need to ask permission in a way, because you've already talked about it and you've budgeted it, and it's going into your accounts from the account.
Well, I also think from an entrepreneur standpoint, when you make money and then you're like, okay, this chunk goes to taxes, right? And then you have the rest and you're like, now what? Because then you feel guilty of like, okay, well, do I take this part and then invest this percentage and then this percentage's profit, or is this, and then it kind of eliminates that whole thing, because you're like, no, this money that I'm setting aside for me is for me to spend.
I'm going to have to go and implement some of these things after this. I'm like, okay, this is good. This is good. I like this.
Well, and all we're talking about is account structures, right? Like it's not rocket science, but to your point, Jamie, is so many people, like when you meet your partner, you just kind of fall into whatever dynamic you're in, and then there's very little reevaluation on when should this change. And often what I see is the same dynamic is occurring even after we have children with this person, where it's like, to your point, things are all separate. Then it becomes this game of like, well, I paid for groceries last time. I've literally talked to couples who I've been like, okay, can I eat these raspberries? Not my clients. And they're like, oh no, those are not my raspberries. Those are my wife's raspberries. And I'm like, well, this is really separate and weird, right? So like, it's so weird. It was weird. It was weird, and they are divorced, just for the caveat. But
well, there's your answer, folks.
Well, there you
Share
go.
your raspberries.
Share your raspberries, moral of the story, and the podcast now. But really, what happens is we truly don't evaluate like how money is moving through our house together as a couple, and yet money is one of the biggest things that's happening in a coupleship. But we are, again, taught that we should not talk about money. It's taboo. We should avoid it even with our partners. And it creates this whole level of dynamic. So yes, to your point about how money flows through the house is like, money comes in, right? This is our gross number that we're getting. Set money aside for your taxes, leave money available for your operating expenses, but then you're paying yourself. That's how you're sustaining a livelihood. And so we have to have a pulse not only on our business finances, but what's trickling then into our personal finances and how we want that structured in your, and again, every couple might look a little bit different, but for the most part, you are a couple, and like it or not, you have a prenup established by the state. It is a prenup of whatever the agreement is. So unless you have a different prenup, you have a 50-50 obligation in your house. Like the state sees you as one in Minnesota and a lot of other places. So then we need to treat our money as such, and then decide how we want to see the future, like long-term future for ourselves, but also how the present is also working.
I love that.
That's so, literally, I'm like, this is so good. I'm like, yes.
I feel like a lot of it too probably has to do with so Daniel and I have always done joint everything together, but we got married at 18. So basically we were we met so young that we were unhealthily codependent. And so everything that we did was together anyway. And I bet that's different for people who meet, who were had the time in their life where they were independent and then they have to merge their independence together.
See, and that's where I feel like I struggle, because I'm Miss Independent all the time. And I'm I don't. So I'm okay, this is good. Jamie, we're going to work on this later.
It's uncomfortable to change it, right? Either way, no matter which dynamic you're in. And to your earlier point about the permission, I like to think of my couples as equal partners. I know it's crazy, but if we're equal partners, that means that I am not going to my husband for permission. In fact, I just had to get my tires. There was a slash in my tire. It was really weird. But the tire guy was call your husband, ask for permission. I don't want you to get in trouble. And I really had a heyday with that one. I was I'm just going to stop you there, sir. And I literally was I am a financial therapist. I know my numbers. I am going to ask my husband for his opinion on the matter, not his permission on the matter. Yes. And then I ended up getting a giant discount on my tires because the guy felt like a dick. And I was well, you are. So there you go.
I feel like my husband would have been she's good. Just do what she wants. Why are you calling me?
Yeah, it was weird. But that's what happens with
Daniel would have been why are you taking your car in somewhere? That's going to cost X amount of money. I'm going to fix it myself.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I would also love to know now, what are some common misconceptions about finances?
That it's hard. Period. That it's hard. It's not, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I would say it's simple. It is far more simple than we make it out to be, especially the investing stuff, as people are constantly so scared to invest, and they make it out to be this thing that only rich people invest their money. And I'm no, that's actually how you get rich, right? So yeah. I think there's just a huge lack of education. And again, it's this weird thing that we are not taught money. Oftentimes we weren't taught money in our homes. We weren't taught money growing up in school. And so then you turn 18 and you're okay, well now I should just understand how money works. And then you're really hard on yourself for not totally understanding how money works. And then you think, you're scrolling on social media and you see everybody else living their lives and you're well, they all understand how money works. And so now I'm the problem. And then that shame box just keeps getting filled, instead of really taking any type of action on what the education looks like. Now, sometimes taking action can be really challenging because of the experiences that you have once had. A fun fact I like to throw out there all the time is your money habits are established by the time you are 10 years old. There's a lot of evidence to support this. There was a study out of the University of Michigan that looked at this, and so that's really young. The good news is your money habits can be changed, but we have to have the wherewithal and the self-awareness to do that. And it's not always an easy thing. And so then to those people, I say, if you can't find the education on your own, then you need to find your support people who can help you on your journey. And that's huge.
Okay, I love that you brought that study up, because one of my questions that I had down was how your financial decisions and everything impact your children and future generations.
It's a great question. And if you think about the money messages that you received while you were growing up, for a lot of us, and this is kind of a generalized statement, but for a lot of us as millennial women, we were taught things like, we can't afford that. It was something we heard all the time. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is the root of all evil, right? These are common messages that we got. And I have a very strict rule in my house. We never tell our kids we can't afford that, because the reality is we actually can afford whatever it is that they are asking for. a Barbie, I can afford that. Am I choosing to buy that day, or am I prioritizing that? No. And so, not always, right? And so that's the language then that I use with my kids instead is, oh, we're not prioritizing that right now. And if she, my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old's kind of just like chilling. But my 4-year-old has so many questions, which is amazing. And so we talk about money openly in my house all the time. And I, again, speak in the language of priorities. And like right now, we are prioritizing a big vacation. So extra money that we have means it's going to that vacation. Or I'll hold a family meeting and we pass around literally a talking stick, which is a paintbrush typically that my daughter chooses. And we go around the circle and we say one thing we're grateful for. And then we talk about whatever we need to talk about. Sometimes it's simple as like, what are your weekend plans? And other times it's like, hey, we want to plan a big, huge trip to Costa Rica, which means we're probably going to not be going to restaurants as often. How does everyone feel about that? And then we show pictures of Costa Rica, and my daughter's like, water, beach, sand. I would like to go. Literally, this just happened. She was like, can we go tomorrow? And I was like, well, we got to save. And so we're going to go next year. And we talk about it like that. And so it gets to be a fun conversation rather than something about restriction or deprivation and like a negative thing, right?
I love that so much.
It's so funny. So I was at Home Goods with he's almost 4. He'll be 4 next month. And 4-year-old at Home Goods, Mom, look at this. Look at this. It was like a nutcracker. And he's like, can we get this? I really want this. And I'm like, well, let's go home and talk to Daddy about it. And let's just see what we want to do. And maybe we'll put this on the list of things and we'll talk about it. And he's just like, oh, okay, Mommy. Like, I feel like it's so funny because like you watch other people watching you have conversations with your toddler in their store and they're like, how did you just, and I was like, I don't know. I like subconsciously doing everything you just said.
Yeah. Well, growing up, like, I don't remember my parents talking about money at all, ever. But the only things I ever did hear were like, oh, like we can't do that or we can't afford that. Those types of things.
Root of all evil was popular in our house.
But imagine then what those messages are, how they're presenting now, right? Is like a lot of people genuinely don't believe that it is possible to have a positive money conversation because of what they heard or saw, right? In my household, same thing it was fought about always. It was, if there was a conversation about money, it was a fight about money. And so for a long time, that is truly what I believed is like, I don't want that. Like, ugh, no, thank you,
Yeah.
Or like the money is the root of all evil. Okay. What is that telling you for like I get the ick a lot when I'm like, I'm going to be a multimillionaire at some point in my life. That is just, I mean, the math is true, right? And a lot of women immediately are like, oh my God, no, because they were told that having money or money is the root of all evil or having money makes you greedy or makes you these things. And the reality is money is an amplifier. Money is a magnifier. So if you're already a kind, generous human being, guess what? If you have a lot of money, you will also still be a kind and generous person. So I think it's just unfortunate that these messages were passed down and confusing and, added all this extra muck that we kind of need to wade through in order to like let money come in easily, have an abundance mindset, all of these different things.
Yes. I think when I started my business, it was so easy for me to be like, okay, here's money. I'm going to like chipmunk it. I like stuff it everywhere. Like nobody touch it. It's not going anywhere. And then like the last couple of years, it's been like, okay, no, I need to look at money like fluidly because like it'll go out, but it'll come back in. And I feel like for me, when I stopped looking at it as like something that I needed to like hold on to for dear life. And I was like, oh yeah, like this thing might be an investment or this thing might cost a lot, but like it'll come back around. And I feel like that was such a freeing feeling to not feel like I was like living in this constant like death grip.
Yeah, that scarcity mindset is really detrimental in a lot of ways. So that's huge that you've done that work for sure.
I'm trying to think. I'm like, man, you're just calling me out on certain things.
Well, how do you feel like as moms and entrepreneurs, moms can set themselves up financially for success?
What do you mean? How can we do that? Or what's your question?
Like what are some like big steps or like mindset tips that mom entrepreneurs who might be struggling with that money mindset or anything? Like what are some things that you think could be like freeing to them or help them?
Yeah, I think a really good place to start is asking yourself what's working and what isn't working. And so if there are things that are working for you, like there's some moms who are crushing it out there as far as like, yeah, I do my meal planning really well, which means my grocery budget is like locked down and I know that, right? Like maybe that's something you're really good at. But then there's other things such as maybe the communication with your partner or the feeling like you need permission to buy stuff or, you know, like there's other things that aren't working well. Ask yourself that first. And then I would say go back to that account structure and figure out like what is going well here and what isn't, right? I am a solutions focused brief therapist. So I am not the therapist who's doing really deep inner child work with you and interconnected family systems. Like that's not my lane. Really great work. For me, it's more like, okay, presenting problem, again, what's working, what isn't working. Then we look at how you grew up around money. Important to know and to maybe start pulling out some of those patterns, but I don't dwell. I don't sit there very long. I'm very action focused. And so then we look real quick into the numbers of like, what are you bringing in? What is going out? How do we need to be structuring this differently? But I always start like, you know, between that, before getting to the numbers, I should say I always start with goals because I think I call them your North Stars, because when you can have those guiding lights into how you want to then make purchasing decisions, that's a whole different ball game, right? And so then it's way easier to be like, oh yeah, I actually don't want this thing. I'm not going to DoorDash dinner tonight and charge, you know, extra on my card because it's not actually aligned with whatever my guiding lights are right now, whether that's to get out of debt, to save more, to build your business or scale your business or to invest back into your, right? Like there's so many different things and your goals should be different than my goals, right? So everybody has those unique North Stars. And then getting into like, how do we paint the picture to make sure that or lay those stepping stones really to make sure that you're getting to where you want to go. So, I mean, I guess I hope that answers your question.
No, it does.
Yeah, it does for sure.
Because, like, we were just talking about how, like, in your photography business, you can't grow what you don't track. So, like, you can't change if you don't know, like, you have to lay it all out there, black and white, and then that's where you can start to see the problems, the missteps, okay, this is working, this isn't. How can we fix this? If this is working, let's grow that.
Yeah. It's almost like when you're, like, tracking calories, right? You're like, I don't understand why I'm not losing weight. Like, I don't eat that much. And then you start tracking everything. You're like, actually, girly pop.
Look at that. It's such like a beautiful parallel. Like a health journey and a financial wellness journey has so many similarities. And I think it's actually because if you think about it, your health, your money, and your kids are the three things that impact every single decision you make, right? Like if you want to leave your house to go grab a cup of coffee with a girlfriend, say, you first ask yourself, are you healthy enough to do that? And if you are healthy enough, it's just kind of assumed. You don't really think about it. But then you ask yourself, can you afford it? Can you afford the gas to get there? Can you afford the cup of coffee? And then if you can afford it, you are like, well, are my kids coming or are they not? And if they aren't coming, who is watching the kids? And if it's a babysitter, then you go back to question number 2 of, can I afford the babysitter? And it's like this never-ending cycle of that's how the thought process is actually working, and that's how we have to commit to things. And so I think, yeah, those parallels of like, this is what it looks like to be healthy. This is what it looks like to take care of yourself. If you're like actually practicing financial self-care, you are going to be in a lot better position, just as if you're like actually eating well and healthy and moving your body, you are going to be in a better financial, or you're going to be in a better health position later on as well.
I love this so
I'm like,
much.
I'm just like,
I'm
can
like
I
soaking
just
it in.
let you just keep talking? Because I'm like, I could just listen to this all day.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. So while we wrap this up, are there any other like tips or anything that you think would be helpful for any of our listeners?
Yeah, I think if there's one kind of like thing that I could stand on my soapbox and die on that hill and all of those other weird phrases. It's all intentional spending. Like everything for me in finances comes back to intentionality. For business owners, you have to have intentionality around what is your overhead looking like, right? So like not only is the income super important, but so is what is your overhead. And I think we oftentimes as consumers in America get very caught up in like we are constantly being sold to, whether it's on social media, whether it's just like walking around and seeing, but like it's constant. It is a constant stream of being sold to. And so we get really caught up in like, well, you need this certain software or you need, right? And for you and your audience, a lot of it's photography, right? What do you guys really need as far as like an overhead standpoint? Is there anything that's extra right now that you could maybe cut because you're in a season where you're trying to like, right? Or is there that you need to buy back your time and you need to get a VA? Or where are you at in that journey is really important, but putting that intentionality back into it. Then again, when your business, is your income is trickling into your personal finances, it comes back to what are we being intentional about? Like, are we just exhausted at the end of the day and we're curled up on the couch and our fingers drift to TikTok and then we find ourselves on Talk Shop and all of a sudden we're getting things that we don't really need and it's super unintentional because we're essentially dissociating as we're buying some of this shit? Probably. Although Talk Shop is probably going away, so, neither
R.I.P.
R.I.P. forever, bye. But Amazon is the same. Even, Instagram, same thing, right? It doesn't matter where you are, but your thumbs are very easy to drift to these things. And these huge corporations, they are smarter than us. Let's just face the music. They just are. Bezos is, we don't love him, but he is smarter than me. I know that. And so they have developed the software to quite literally make it more difficult to not one click to buy that thing than it is to actually like cognitive be like, I'm not going to buy this thing, right? And so I think putting intentionality back into your finances is huge, which for me can look totally different than it does for you. But one thing I often tell my clients is, get off of like the apps as far as like your banking apps and the tracking, whatever, and actually have an intentional money date. And sometimes I do this with myself. Sometimes my husband is there, right? But have an intentional time where you sit with your desktop. It just creates this more intentional time with you looking at your money, what's coming in, what's going out, and make space for that, because that relationship with your money is in fact a relationship, and like all other relationships in your life, it needs to be nurtured in order to actually thrive and grow and be equitable. And so I think doing some of those things can be so helpful in how we actually show up in our values, show up in our priorities, and putting that intention back into it is a game changer.
I can definitely agree to that, because it's one of my favorite things to do is just like when we spreadsheet, I lay everything out in the spreadsheet, and like there's a spending log and I'm like, I spent how much on this? But like I have like sinking funds, and it has like different categories between sinking funds, wants, needs, like everything like that. So it literally lays everything out, and like, how much did you want to spend? How much did you actually spend this month? And well, like what things make you happy to spend on money, and like what things don't make you happy. And then you kind of feel guilty about buying that. So it's like, TikTok shop. It's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have bought that. But like for me, I've noticed my money habits. Food makes me happy. I like spending money on food, but like, I feel like I'm just curious. I know we said we were wrapping this up because it's like, I had one more question, I swear. Like just thoughts around things that make you happy to spend money on, and like noticing like habits on like what doesn't make you happy to spend money on, and like noticing those habits with the spending log and everything.
Oh, it's huge. And it comes back to, right, your baseline level of happiness. And there's things that are going to make you happy that you should spend money on. This whole, like, you're either a saver or a spender thing is such a myth. You need to be both. You need to know how to have the skill of spending money and doing so on things that make you happy. Again, mine are the girls' trips, taking time with my husband, like going on a date. And how often are you like, yes, I prioritize my relationship. And then if you showed me your calendar, I would be like, okay, but when's the last time you guys actually went on a date? We're we're not prioritizing that, right? So I think knowing that can be really big. And so when you're actually spending money on the things that are bringing you constant joy versus those impulse buys versus those things that we're just trying to like entertain ourselves or get away from the boredom or whatever it is, or get that quick hit of dopamine, it makes a world of difference in how your baseline level of happiness is actually presenting.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I love it so much. So where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more, listen more,
do
all
like
the things?
One-on-ones, just like pick
do you
your
offer
brain?
like one-on-ones, like spill the tea?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you can come find me at Financial Therapist Lindsey on Instagram. It's the only thing that I'm on at this point. And then my website is financialselfcareblog.com. And I have an entire financial therapy page. You can learn about what that looks like there. And then my podcast is Financial Self-Care with Financial Therapist Lindsey. And you're right. Yeah, I offer one-on-one services again with, I do some like business coaching within the therapeutic kind of relationship that I have. I also practice as a money coach, so then I can work outside of Minnesota state lines where I'm licensed in Minnesota. So there's kind of a broad spectrum of what I do. A lot of times my therapeutic relationship is like a one-on-one weekly for a little while, then we push it to bi-weekly, monthly maintenance, etc. And then I also do intensives or a deep dive where it's a 2-hour, I give you like preemptive homework stuff to like fill all this out. Let's see where your numbers are lying. And then you come back and we look at the entire picture together. And then I do an action plan right up for you as far as what do you then need to do, coming for, or like going forward in your life, as far as like, this is what we talked about, this is what we talked about, this is what that's going to look like, this is where that's going to get you, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, we both love to-do lists and like hard deadlines. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds great.
And spreadsheets.
I
love spreadsheets.
I can't design one, but I love filling them out and looking at them.
Oh, girl, I got you. I have I call it the intentional spending planner. It's literally $10 on Etsy, and you just plug in all your numbers, and does it. It's great.
Noted.
Okay, we need to put that in the show notes for everybody.
We will do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was so much fun, and I feel like this was just so good that I'm just gonna listen back to it just for my own sake.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.